Hello, 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 everyone. Come on in the room. I know I'm mimicking Tabitha Brown, but she's somewhere one worth mimicking. So come on in the room so that we can get started with this next edition of Live Well Sister. This is your host, Marcie Thomas, the founder of Brown Girl Collective, which is a wonderful space where bold, brilliant, and beautiful Black women are celebrated, not just in Black History Month, not just in Women's History Month, but 365 days a year. And Live Well Sister is a space where we have an opportunity to talk to women and occasionally men, just so you know, who are all about helping us to live our best lives, whether it be in our spirits, in our own personal self-care, or our relationships, the way that we work in the world and manifest our purpose, or our finances, as well as joy and being able to serve the community. So there are a lot of different things that you may see touched upon in the weeks ahead, but I welcome you to this space and I look forward to being able to chat with you more about tonight's special guest. So come on in the room as always. Let us know where you're joining us from and if this is your first time being with us or not. And we're going to go ahead and get started here. Looks like our guest may have had a slight technical difficulty. I'm making sure she's back. So hold on one second. And all right, she's back. So I'm going to go ahead and do all our introduction. Just want to make sure she was here. So tonight's special guest is Cole Arthur Riley, who is more than anything a writer. Born and for the most part raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, she studied writing at the University of Pittsburgh, but traces her love of words back to the voice of her father, who would bribe her and her siblings to write poems and stories to get out of chores or for cold hard cash. Now, I'm just sidebar. I wish my dad would have done that. He made me write just because he wanted me to write. So your dad was at least there was an award in it. She is currently the spiritual teacher in residence with Cornell University's Office of Spirituality and Meaning Making. She is also the creator of Black Liturgies, a space for Black spiritual words of liberation, lament, rage, and rest, and a project of the Center for Dignity and Contemplation, where she serves as the executive curator. Her debut book, the New York Times best-selling This Here Flesh, was published just last week on 2/22/22. So without any further delay, let's welcome this wonderful author to our space, Cole Arthur Riley. Welcome, Cole.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I mentioned it to you before. I just mentioned it again. Congratulations on being a New York Times bestselling author. That's quite an honor.
Thank you. Still
Yep.
doesn't feel real.
Right, so I think it just happened yesterday, not even 24 hours has it been?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So that's really exciting. As I was telling my mom, we get the best of the best here. So y'all go ahead and like and share this on out so people can hear what Cole has to say. So for those who aren't familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about what Black Liturgies actually is.
Sure. Liturgy, if you aren't familiar with the word, it's essentially just a kind of form for a religious ceremony or service. Um, i- if you've been to an Anglican service or a Catholic mass, you can kind of think something similar to that. But at its root, it just means work of the people. And it's this kind of shared way to experience spirituality. So, yeah, with Black liturgies, I try to do that and center Blackness, Black literature, Black art, Black poetry, and connect it with spiritual practices.
Absolutely. And if you've had a chance to read the book or if you've been following her on social media, you do get a chance to see that it is a marriage of all of those things. All of those things. So, how long have you actually been running Black Liturgies?
I started it the summer of 2020, so it
Oh,
hasn't been 2 years. It hasn't even been 2 years yet. Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Mhm.
That's quite powerful because that was right in the thick of the beginning stages of the pandemic.
Mhm. Yes. And when, the world was, finally ready to contend with black death, black murder, and yeah, I think I was just looking for a place that felt safe for my spirituality and my blackness to work together.
And that it does. So just did the idea for the book come first or did the idea for Black Liturgies come first? Because it seems like a lot has happened in a short space.
Right, yeah, a lot has I mean, as you said, I've been a writer since I was little. I've always dreamed of writing the book. Um, it's just that I think Black Liturgies gave me the platform to do it, but it gave me the kind of, like, in to the publishing world to actually make it happen, thankfully.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Because a lot of people don't realize we're in a different stage now that yes, you can just write a book, but you people are looking for, they're gonna look, oh, how big is your following? They want to know
Mhm.
certain
Yep.
things about you as a writer. So that was a smart way to go. So, well, I know that you have a little excerpt for us. So for those who may not be familiar with the work or just want to hear it read from your voice, please share a little bit with us and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Okay. This is from the chapter on lament. He said they used to steal cars like they were taking the bus. On the weekends, my dad and Corey would jump one and drive it a minute up the way from the roller rink and walk the rest. If they needed a ride home, they'd just jump another and head back. One night, Mario gets a Trans Am and picks my dad and Corey up to go party in Homewood. They go to get ready first, find a little buzz before leaving, but then two bright black angels show up, who my father and Corey would rather get drunk with, so they decide to stay behind. Mario dips without them and goes to pick up a few others, and they're speeding down East Carson. I mean, fast. Too damn fast, my father tells me, hugging himself. And before Mario's body can hear his mind screaming, he collides with another car, an elderly couple. And as soon as their noses touch, the cars become one and explode. Everyone died in the fire except Roger, who caught an air underneath him as he went soaring out of the crumpled metal and landed off far away and alone. Roger ended up in a coma, and then in the hospital for years after that night. We were just with him, my father says. I should be dead. It wasn't until Tuesday, when my father watched the Challenger space shuttle explode 70 seconds after takeoff, that he finally felt an agony stir in him. In that moment, when the whole world inhaled sharply and fell silent, my father bowed his head and screamed. There, sitting alone on the edge of his bed while the world grieved seven mighty space heroes, my father wept for his own, for Mario, and for the night chariot that in the end belonged to him. You might think the sadness of the world eclipsed my father's cries, but in mystery, it amplified them. I don't know what that did to me. It was like someone poured heat all over me and I was burning too. My father didn't know how to grieve for his friend until the whole world stopped and grieved. It is not always instinctual.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. That just gives us a little taste of, how you navigate through the book. One of the things, there are basically 15 different topics,
Mhm.
starting with dignity and working our way through liberation, because a lot of
Mhm.
what you talk about is about us being liberated. And you do share that primarily through your own personal stories, you yourself, as well as talking a lot about your dad, which you
Mhm.
just shared, and also your grandma, who is his mother, correct?
Mhm. Correct. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. That that's just a powerful way, just to share ideas through story.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think I didn't expect to do it that way, but as I started writing, I realized I'm more than most things. I think I'm a storyteller, and so it was really difficult for me to write about these topics without connecting them to some kind of lived experience without humanizing someone in the process. And initially, I thought, I mean, when I decided, okay, I'll incorporate stories, at first I was thinking it will just be random, lots of different people in my life. And then
Mhm.
as I started to do it, I really just wanted to write about my father and my grandma. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I think I could really um, convey like really like complicated nuance portraits of them if I just focused on those two. So, um, or the three of us, rather. I guess I'm included in that.
Right, yeah, right. And one of the things I told you offline is that it's powerful anyway. I mean, just the story, and we'll get into some of the themes in the different chapters. But for me personally, reading it right now, today is actually the fourth anniversary of the day that my father passed away. So it's like, wow, to read so much about you and your love for your father and the stories and the relationship, it brought a lot of things home to me in even a more profound way, just because, yes, the stories are different, different things are
Mhm.
taking place, but just understanding that relationship that you have with your father, because a lot of times, a lot of the things that we read or we come across are centered in relationships between mothers and daughters. But
Yeah.
in this case, it's a daughter and her father. And then, of course, as we, are look to God as father. I mean, there's that. I mean, there's just so many different things in that.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is, speaking of God as father, that is one of the other things in your book that I do love, is that you speak of a triune God in three persons, and you also use a variety of pronouns to describe God.
Yeah.
I know that was intentional.
It was. Yeah, it was. I mean, I just think I, for a really long time, tried to fit God into these narrow categories because I was afraid what people would think. But I mean, there's a lot of history around people engaging the Black feminine, the sacred Black feminine, um, and engaging that in God. There's a long history, a long tradition of people calling God mother. It's just we don't really go to those texts. We don't go to those places. We don't we'll go to other things that those thinkers have written, but we don't usually go to that. And um I don't know. For me, I think I wouldn't have been true to my own experience with the divine if I would have painted this hyper masculine picture of my connection with him. There's a wonderful book that just came out called God is a Black Woman by Dr. Christina Cleveland. I could not recommend it more. I've admired her work for a long time, but she basically, I know I'm not supposed to be talking about her book, we're supposed to be talking about my book, but what I wish I had her book when I was writing this one. She travels around to these different Black Madonnas in France, and she talks about this pilgrimage that she went on, engaging and just kind of reconnecting with the sacred Black feminine, and it's so good. So if anyone's watching and you're kind of like scratching your head about the use of different pronouns for God, that's a really good place to start, I think.
Absolutely. And I don't know if she's going to watch this or not, but she is a follower of Brown Girl Collective. So
Ooh.
I'm hoping I do have that book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm going to go ahead and, take some time to read it. And hopefully we can have her come talk to us as well, because that would really be
Yes.
great. But I think that is so powerful, because one of the other things is that for me personally, at the beginning of the year, I decided, I think I'm going to take a trip back through the Bible, start in Genesis and work my way through, just listening. Actually, I've been listening more so than reading, because if you all follow here, you know that I'm always reading, sometimes two books a week. So it gets to be a lot. But
Oh.
I decided to start listening to the Bible on tape. And I just have to be honest, I was getting frustrated. I was
Mhm.
getting a little irritated, because it's like just thinking of the treatment of women,
Yep.
not about God, the higher power, but just about some of the ways that women were considered or not considered, or,
Mhm.
went unnamed, and all of these different things. And when you are trying to find your place in this spiritual and in your spiritual sense, it's kind of hard to do that when you don't see yourself.
Mhm. Yep, exactly. And when your only picture of God is a white man, like, what does that do to you as a
Hmm.
Black woman? What is that really doing to us when I'm begging a white male God for something on a Sunday, you know? That does something to Black people spiritually, I think. Yeah. It's I wish that more people felt free to, like, name what you just did, that just tension of encountering scripture or even encountering spiritual spaces that are just cruel to women or just exclusionary, and we're, like, trying to paint a pretty picture of something that at times is just really ugly and terrible, and, that's that. And I feel like if we start to say those things, I think it's easier, at least for me, when I hear people name those things, it's easier for me to be in those spaces 'cause I know it's not just a delusional space, like, I trust spaces that are gonna name that, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the stories that you chose to center in your book, because just so you know, this isn't like a Bible text. It's a lot of personal
Yeah.
stories and things like that. But when you do choose to introduce biblical stories, you center women's stories, which I love that as well. A lot of times women, they get pushed to the background, or, it's kind of like you tell her story in the middle of talking about what the man is doing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I'm just drawn to those stories. I think even if you're not a Christian or if you're not interested in, like, the Christian system in terms of a belief system, I just think there are a lot of interesting stories in different religions, and I don't know, I'm drawn to the stories of women.
Hmm. Which makes sense, as you are a woman. We just have someone, Bella says she has just a quick comment. She has twin granddaughters who are really in the manifesting and the spiritual realm now. They just turned 18. All right. Going to get
Ooh,
your book for them. They would love it. And congratulations. Thank
thank
you for your
you.
comment, Bella.
Yes, thank
Appreciate.
you.
Yes, and I think that your daughters would or granddaughters would appreciate the book, definitely. So, just going back to basically, you start with, as I've already mentioned, dignity, and we can't get into everything because it's just too much. Plus, you need to read the book. But as with talking about family, talking about your family connections, um, you also talk about some health challenges that you have as well throughout the book, and I really do love the way that you share those things, even when they're difficult, as you said, because it paints it as something real. It makes the concepts and all of the things that you're talking about just real when you can look at someone's life and say, ah, okay, I understand.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think stories do that. I mean, if there's anything we learn from Toni Morrison, it's that. It's like you can't I can't remember the exact quote, but she's like, you know, Don't tell me what to think. Tell me what your name is. Tell me a story. Tell me." And I don't know. I think that there are, good texts out there that are just concerned with giving you ideas and telling you what to think. Some of them, that's not me as a writer. I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
think I could do any of these things justice without stories behind them. And I think that's how people really learn about themselves is through story.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just some of the chapters that really spoke to me. I'm going to go in chronological order in the book, even though not each one. When you talk about place and finding a sense of place,
Mhm.
I find that that's oftentimes something that we may struggle with because, I'll use my story as an example. I was born and raised not too far from where you are in Pittsburgh. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, originally,
Oh, okay.
but I haven't lived in Cleveland in years and years and years. I was in the Air Force and traveled and did a lot of things, going to a lot of different places. And I have found myself over the years trying to find a sense of place, which also ties into kind of a sense of belonging because, if you're here and there and you're all over the place, sometimes it's hard to find that belonging because you're always moving here and there. What is it about the sense of place that you felt was important to share with your readers?
Mhm. I think that it's one of the primary ways that we're formed, even if we wish that wasn't true. A lot of
Mhm.
the times when we think of the things that formed us, we'll think about situations or even like meaningful people in our life, which is fine. But I was trying to get at the fact that your very physical surroundings form you. And so I was raised in the city. I was raised in Pittsburgh. And when I went to college, I think a lot of people who first generation college students, you go off to college, you're in this new place and you have choices to make. Like, am I gonna leave that part of me behind, which feels like such a different self than the one that I'm living? Or am I gonna remember? Am I gonna really acknowledge where I've come from? And I think there are people who are prone to escapism. I'm one of those people, unfortunately, and then there are people that I learn from who really know how to look back and think, "No, like, this is what made me. I wanna go back to these places." Um, my sister just drove down this street that we used to live on, and she called me yesterday and was like, "I was just on La Marito Street, and, like, the next time you come, we gotta go." And I was like, "Why?" And my first thought was like, "Why?" And then
Mm.
I'm like, well, of course, like, don't I wanna remember these places that made me, that even if there's, like, pain attached to those places, I don't wanna forget that, because there was also beauty in a lot of those places. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because just in you saying that, that reminded me of my best childhood friend still lives down the street from the house that I grew up in. So the times that I've gone back to Cleveland, I ride by, and see the house and things like that. But it was always an external view. But
Mhm.
one day we were talking about it. So let me go to, was it Zillow or one of those, and said, let me look it up and see if there are any pictures. And there were.
Mm.
And for me, that was just like, I bawled like a baby. I like
Mm.
lost it looking at the pictures. Because I mean, of course, some things that changed, but a lot of it, I could remember, and I
Mhm.
shared it with my mom, because she's not there any longer either. And we both were like, wow, that's the same, that's different, whatever. But for me, it was very cleansing actually, because
Mhm.
as I mentioned earlier, when I left Cleveland and joined the military. My father moved out of that house while I was away. So I never got a chance to have like my last walk through, oh, my room, my this.
Yeah.
I never got a chance to do that
Mhm.
until like last year when I had the opportunity to see those pictures. So, it is something that definitely formed me, even though I'm not currently there. I probably will never move back to Cleveland, but it did form who I am. So yes, that's
Mhm.
an important thing
Mhm.
with that. And it makes me, as I mentioned also, just the sense of belonging. Throughout the story you talk a lot about your family and just the sense of belonging that you have with your family, but also a wider sense of belonging as a larger community.
Mhm. Yeah. I think they're both important, and, you know, many of us, I'm sure, who are watching, or I think we have complicated family systems. Um yeah, that's normal, but to still try to, even if you don't feel a sense of belonging in your kind of family system, to at least pay attention to that, to at least notice that in yourself, to realize, "I feel really out of place in my family," or instead of to just completely, yeah, completely extract yourself from that. Like, what does it mean to really question, why have I felt alone in my family? Or why do I feel most known and seen in my family? But yeah, that sense of belonging. I just think that, I mean, I'm only 31, but as I get older, I see for myself and a lot of people around me that is the primary thing that's driving so many fears and so many desires, is this just this desire for belonging, this desire to to be embraced, to
Mhm.
not be in fear of being alienated. So I think that's, the reason why a lot of people have hold the beliefs that they do. The older I get, the more I'm like, I don't know how much I even believe this, or am I just worried that I'm gonna lose some sense of belonging if I say I no longer believe this? Um, so yeah, I actually I thought about not even making that a chapter
Wow. Okay.
and making it like an overarching kind of thing in the book, but then I realized I couldn't go as deep as I wanted to into that concept of belonging if I didn't make it a chapter, so I did in the end, thankfully.
Right. And what you just said really made me think of something, because it is true that yes, we want this sense of belonging. And I think that's why in many cases we may hang on to things that don't work for us anymore,
Yep.
because we want to belong, or we're afraid that if we, oh, well, I'm going to go, consider this or pursue that, that someone is going to, have something negative to say about it, or maybe think of us differently
Mhm.
in that
Yep.
process.
Mhm.
Because you kind of mentioned it a little later in the book, as y'all can't see it necessarily because of the light, but yeah, I have all kinds of bookmarks and turn downs, because I mean, every page, every other page, there was something that I'm just like, wow, 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 aha moment, as Oprah would say. But the last 2 weeks, if you've been following, and if not, you can go back and look. 2 weeks ago, I had Olivia Scott on, who runs Freedom at the Mat. Last week, I had Faith Hunter, who is Spiritually Fly. They're both like yoga practitioners, and help people with meditation and spiritual matters and things like that. And so you are like just like the icing on top of that, because that's one of the things that you talk about. Even though it's largely from a Christian lens, it is about learning what it means to meditate, learning that it's okay to pursue things or look at things in a different way. And so I really
Mhm.
appreciate that there is a space in there where you kind of talk about that, like it's okay to find what works for you.
Yes, I'm glad that that comes across because, yeah, sometimes the Christian thing can kind of eclipse the rest when really, like, I wanted to be transparent that, like, I am kind of coming from a Christian place without making anyone feel like I think that I'm right, or that I've, like, I'm more interested in, like, kind of what you said, this, like, these questions of meditation, like, what does it mean to love? What does it mean to cry? What does it mean to connect? Like, these greater human questions, and I'm coming at it through, a Christian lens sometimes, but no more than I am using story?
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Because I mentioned it before we came on, even the Bible tells us to work out our own salvation. So this is just a lot of these other things are just tools to help us work out our own salvation, so to
Mhm.
speak. So
Mhm.
I thank you and I appreciate you for that. One of the things, and this speaks a lot to your personal experience, even though it's one chapter, but you talk about it throughout the book, is the concept of our bodies
Mhm.
and the things that we may deal with or go through in our bodies. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I don't know if this resonates with you any because I know you're a reader, and sometimes I find this to be true of people who can read a lot. But I just always been like kind of disembodied, kind of living in my mind or in books or, and not really fully aware of myself and or even kind of wanting to forget myself a little bit, wanting to forget my body. I as you mentioned, have, a number of illnesses, another number of health issues that make it so that it's very tempting to just kind of numb my connection to my body. Because when I pay attention, I realize I'm in pain, like I'm hurting, my hands hurt or my eyes hurt, and so I try to forget and kind of I have all these, mental distractions, but I'm realizing, doing that, it seems like it's good. It seems like it's a path, to kind of
Mhm.
make it, but I was just killing myself. It was such it came at a cost, kind of forgetting my body and living this disembodied existence, forgetting to eat until 8 p.m. at night. And I
Mm,
think, Black woman, it's I don't blame us for this. I don't blame us for needing to for accidentally forgetting these things. I find that, like, my Black woman friends, this to be kind of common, especially when we were younger, that we would just kind of forget to take care of our bodies. We wouldn't,
mm,
give them the time they deserve because we were so busy worrying about other people, caring for other people. And I'm really grateful for this kind of movement. I feel this kind of shared movement of people saying, like, no, I can't help you without helping me. Like, I can't care well without caring for myself and making sure that I'm cared for, and that I don't always have to do that, that I don't always have to be the bridge. Sometimes I can, just lie down and rest and pay attention and eat 3 meals a
right.
day, you know? Yeah.
That is so very true. That what's saying, the black woman is the mule of the world, and unfortunately, oftentimes that's true. And a lot of the systems, whether even I mean even in the church, a lot of the
Yep.
systems that are set up are such that we're here to work, strive. We know that the black church specifically wouldn't survive without black women, because that,
Yep.
even though there are male pastors in many cases, it's the black women that are the backbone of a lot of our institutions. So it's all about the work, and what are we going to do. And another thing that I think about, because as you mentioned, I do read a lot, and some of the books that we've read in the last month for Black History Month were a lot about women who were enslaved, or or just in situations where they had to kind of like shut everything off and go numb, so to speak,
Yep, yep.
just as a sense of survival. And even though
Yeah.
we may not be enslaved any longer, there are still ways in which we are shutting everything off as a form of survival, or to help others,
Mhm.
or to feel like this is what we need to do to get ahead.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's really hard not to inherit those patterns, those kind of, like, yeah, those systems of survival. I would never fault, the women in my family for it, for what they have felt they needed to do to survive. But yeah, I've absorbed some of it. I've absorbed, I mean, even my dad, I would say, is an overworker. And I mean, I'm curious how if you've seen a shift happening. I mean, we're coming from different generations, how if you see a difference now than, you know, 10 years ago, among Black women talking about these things, or if this feels familiar, this kind of surge of Black women trying to care for their bodies.
I would definitely say it's happened more in the last 10 years or so. And if you've got comments, and those of you who are watching, please feel free to chime in. But I would say probably more so in the last 10 years, 10, maybe 15, that we've seen more women starting to say, okay, yes, I'm going to take time for me. I'm going
Mhm.
to make sure that I'm, being cared for. Yeah, Chel Bella is saying, yes, she's noticed. Yes, just taking time out to do that. But I'm going to be honest, and some people are speaking to this as well, that even though we may be doing it more, sometimes it's not like these conversations like what you and I are having, or that I've had in the last couple of weeks. It may be, oh, well, I'm going to go get my massages, or I'm going to go, take a girls trip, or I'm going to go do, certain things, which is
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that. And we do need that. We do need to enjoy luxury whenever we can. We do
Mhm.
need to get away from everything whenever ever we can. But there is a deeper thing
Yep.
that sometimes we haven't necessarily been working on,
Mm.
that I'm starting to see, like with people like you, with some of the things that that you're talking about and putting out into the world. I know you mentioned her in the book, the Nap Ministry. Some of the
Mhm.
things that that she's talking about. I think it's Trisha Hersey or something like that.
Mhm.
The things that
Yep.
she's talking about that are about, okay, yeah, we can rest. And that's just so important.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's more than, like, this kind of capitalist Band-Aid of like you said, there's nothing wrong with luxury. I'm trying to live into that, but at the
Mhm.
same time, like, what's the deeper thing and is r like, how much I know other people have criticized this, Trisha Hersey, being one significant voice doing it, of, like, how much of what you think is self-care is, like, just capitalism having you in a chokehold and making you think you need all of these things in order to care for yourself and not really letting you settle into yourself and quiet yourself to figure out what do I need because the answer is not a bubble bath for all of us.
Right.
Some of us need very different things to care
Absolutely.
for and listen to our bodies. Yeah.
And the reality of it is everybody can't do those things. So then there's that. It becomes this thing where it's like you can only really practice self-care if you are of a certain economic status because this is what
Yep.
self-care means. This is what self-care looks like. So this is what you can do. But what about, the woman who's working, a minimum wage job or two or three minimum wage jobs to take care of her kids? She
Mhm.
can't necessarily do what someone who is in middle class or upper middle class can do.
Yep. Yep.
So is
Yeah.
she not entitled to self-care?
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, that is something that I've seen, and hopefully, more people will begin to recognize that and work towards that, making sure that it's something that's more equitable, and we can help our sisters or encourage our sisters who may not be able to do certain things, or make things available to them just so they can have the experience. So.
Mhm. Mhm.
One of the other things that you speak of is calling and what it means to have a calling, what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Mhm. Yeah. It's making me think of what you just said actually of, like, how it can be exclusive to, um, people of different people who have been economically neglected, economically oppressed in thinking about self-care. I feel similarly about calling because especially in college, I was in a lot of spaces that made it seem like calling was just about what job you chose, and I would be in these rooms, in these spaces where,
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with this, but it just didn't I'm like, people where I'm from, they're not getting these same choices, so what does it mean for people like, people where I'm from, they're not debating whether or not they'll be an engineer or, a doctor, or that's that so are you saying that they're not called, Are they do they not have a calling? Um, so I became, yeah, just really suspicious of
Mhm.
language of calling in college and just feeling this disconnect, even though I was privileged enough to choose, my career. And I started to think of it more in terms of, you know, how we work, how we live into the world, how we live in the world, how we live at our purpose, like not so much what I'm doing, but am I doing it with integrity? Am I trying to do it justly, am I paying attention to the people that I'm interacting with? Um, and I think redefining or maybe better, reclaiming calling as that, as opposed to just some like what you just happen to do from 9 to 5 every day, I think is a lot more healing, honestly. Um, yeah, a lot more healing and more inclusive. And because
Absolutely.
I don't think all callings are work, right? And if we only think callings are work, then what will we be doing in order to impress other people or in order to impress God or whatever? You're gonna feel like your kind of purpose is always attached to how much you can do, as opposed to, is there some calling to just rest? Is there a call to self-care? No one ever asked me those questions, but I wish they had. Well, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm trying to look. There was something that you said, and of course now I'm not going to be able to find it. Hold on. Hold on. Where you talked about that, specifically. The gist of it is that, people will ask you, what you want to do, or, what do they think you want to be, but they don't ask you who you are or how you are, just
Mhm.
you as a person, as a human. a human being, not always a human doing. That's me
Yes.
paraphrasing. But
Yep. I think and I just feel like I don't know, there's just so many people who are just so aspirational and they expect other people to be that way as well. I have hopes for myself. I have hopes for my future self, but I'm just not someone who lives there. I've just never been that person. Um and I think especially with younger people, we're just so concerned with what's gonna like and I think it comes from a place of care. You're so concerned with, are they gonna be all right? Are they gonna have enough, that we focus so much on, this future self, are you setting up your future self as opposed to really tending to them at present? Like, what do you need today?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And, just as you're talking and you said that you were 31, I'm like, wow. Because, just the mere fact that you have this level of wisdom at the age of 31. Where do you think that all of that comes from? Is it through the relationships and the experiences that you had with family or your own personal experiences, or just a combination of all of the above?
Um, I I don't know. I'm not trying to be like self-deprecating or anything. I don't I before I wrote this book, I didn't really think of myself as wise. Maybe I think I'm observant, and I've always been a very kind of shy, quiet person. I was really quiet as a child, and I think that people who are maybe quieter are usually paying attention for better or worse, sometimes paying attention because they're anxious and they're trying to figure out what the threat is, if there's a threat around them. And so you're kind of hyper vigilant. But sometimes I think that like vigilance is observation and you're just paying attention to people. And I think when I became sick, I had to spend a lot of time in quiet. I spent a lot of time alone, um, a lot of time in bed alone. And one of the things that, one of my health issues involves my eyes, which I talk about a little bit in the book. So I can't even like do those typical kind of numbing things where you just like binge watch Netflix. Like I can't do that anymore. So I would just like because it will hurt my eyes. So I just have to lie in bed a lot of the time. And I think being being in that season of so much restriction kind of took me to places in my mind and took me to memories and gave me room to kind of think about what I think about the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. That would have been a part of it. To have a comment. Yes, you're a wise and observant young lady. It's okay to accept those characteristics. Absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely,
thank you.
absolutely. And as you were talking, now I am an only child, and I'm single, and I don't have children. So, so for me,
Mhm.
it's a lot of alone time. So I can definitely relate to that, because when you're alone, you are, if I'm not, in a book, as you see, there's books on both sides of me, and all around this apartment, there are books. So yes, I do like to read. I like to listen to music and things like that. The art behind me is something that I paint. I enjoy painting. I do a lot of
Mm.
things that are very solitary. So with
Mhm.
that being the case, I think just being solitary, or being in situations where you have a lot of solitude, even if you're not solitary, that
Mhm.
it causes you to think deeper, and sit around and watch people and listen, and pick up on things that maybe when there's a lot of noise people don't catch. So yeah,
Mhm.
I can get
Exactly.
that. I
Mhm.
definitely get that. A couple things I'm going to kind of, well, I'm gonna bring up one and then tie the other one to it. And one of the other concepts that you speak of is rage.
Yes.
And of course, as Black people, we have a lot of reasons to be enraged or angry,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
oftentimes it gets put on us as a negative thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I, yeah, for so long, I was so worried about being perceived as angry, especially after college. So the college and after is when like, just found myself in so many white spaces, um, and felt myself wanting to kind of like shrink myself so I didn't seem like a threat. And
Mm,
so, yeah, I just became really dissociated from anger, and even today I can I struggle sometimes to really tap in and think like, no, it's okay to feel this. It's okay to be honest about this. It's complicated. Like anger, it has such a negative connotation because I think it can lead to people doing unfortunate things, but I think it can also be a really protective force, you know. I'm thinking of like a mother's anger in protecting, you know, her children can be a really protective force. And I think, I don't know, it's hard work to kind of discern when your anger is righteous, so to speak, when it's
yeah,
good.
righteous
And
indignation.
yeah, exactly. And when it's, you know, when it's not, when it's something else, something that more so has like a hold on you, something that you can't really escape and is kind of eclipsing all of your other emotions. Like it's hard to discern those, but I don't think the answer is just to like not be angry people, you know?
Yeah.
Um yeah, but I think as Black women, it's really complicated because then you tap into your anger and then you're always, not always, but some of us are thinking, well, am I now going to be reduced to that? Am I going to be reduced to that expression of anger? Um, but to me, it's still worth it.
Absolutely, because I feel, and you talk about this a lot of times. We are taught that we have to be nice, or we have to present things in a certain way, or you can't really let people know how you feel. But then there are those times when we do need to be able to speak up and speak out, and um, what I oftentimes say, you can disagree or express your opinion without being disagreeable. You know what I mean? You
Mhm.
don't have to be ready to fight per se, but there are
Mhm.
those times in our lives when we do need to be willing to stand up for ourselves and what we believe in. And as you
Mhm.
mentioned in the story, and if you've read the Bible, there were times when Jesus got mad
Mhm. Yep.
or angry. It was tearing stuff up. Like, what's tearing stuff up in here?
Yep. Yep.
So, I mean, if Jesus can get angry, the Christ that we are supposed to emulate, or many
Mhm.
are called to emulate, can get upset or get angry, or express disdain about things that are happening around him. There's absolutely
Mhm.
nothing wrong with us doing the same.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I feel like I just don't see like many stories where in the Bible where I close the book and think like, "Oh, Jesus is really nice." Like I mean, even before I was a Christian, I never had that experience. You know, I had many kind of thoughts about Jesus, but not a niceness. I never felt that. I sometimes I think Jesus seems snarky in the stories, and like sometimes I think he seems irritated. Like there's good things too, you know. I think
Right.
protective and kind, but nice. It's if it's there, it's I think it's more rare than the other emotions. You know, I see sadness, I see tension, I see yeah. Anyways, I think it the thing that I whether or not you are a Christian, like, the thing that I appreciate about that story of anger and Jesus tearing things up, tearing up the temple, is that it is this embodied expression of anger too. Like, he doesn't just in the story, he doesn't just say, like, "I'm angry." Like, I'm angry with you," you know? It's this very real, very visceral kind of reaction, and I think, there's a lot of people right now, a lot of people saying, like, using language of civility, but I what
Mhm.
they don't really mean civility, they mean they want you to calm down, you know? They don't
Mhm.
a and I resist that by thinking back to that temple scene of like, okay, things don't I'm not gonna tell Jesus to calm down, you know? And and
Right.
and so I think I don't know, there's the yeah, I while I worry that people will reduce me to, the angry Black woman stereotype, I don't wanna be someone who only experiences anger in my mind. Like, I wanna feel it in my body. I want to, listen to the even the very biological responses that happen when we're angry, that kind of lead to adrenaline rushing, because like I said, they can be a really protective force.
Mhm.
um I think we saw that in the summer of 2020, when we took to the streets, and there was sadness, there was beauty, there was pain, but there was also, I think, a really sacred anger that I hope is remembered, um and not reduced to these impressions of violence. I think there was a good anger there too.
Absolutely, absolutely. We were getting into good trouble, as John
Yes.
would have said. Absolutely. Which, well, we're getting close to our time, so I'm going to skip over one. I was going to talk about justice. Is there anything you wanted to share about justice?
Oh, we can move on. That's fine.
Yeah, because that would probably take up a lot of time. But I'm thinking about, and we touched on this already as well, just rest and joy.
Mhm.
Are two things, of course, as we mentioned, the NAP ministry and others are talking about the concept of rest. One of the things that I love that you say in the book, and once again, I'm paraphrasing, but it has to do with just even our connection to God or Christ or, church, where, a lot of times it's always about how do we serve, but
Mhm.
sometimes we can just rest in
Yeah.
God, rest
Yeah.
in that relationship. It doesn't always have to be our labor, but it can be our rest as well.
Mhm. Yeah. I think I think there's not many things in the world that white supremacy hasn't tainted. And I think white capitalist supremacy in particular, and I think one of those things, one of the ways that has tainted Christian spaces is this doing, is this like we have to go and we have to convert everyone, and like this very I don't know, this kind of like urgent demand of our time and of our service. And I think service really should be chosen, and you shouldn't feel, this sense of guilt, um, or like be shamed into it. I don't, I
Mm,
just don't think that's, I mean, it works. Obviously, we have a lot of people working out of guilt and shame, but it's just not the way. And I think when I read scripture, I hear a lot of language of rest. When I come to me, all you who are weary, I'll give you rest. But there's this psalm as well that talks about, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Or there's just a lot of these instances where I feel like the call, or even salvation in general, is linked to rest in some way, or language of rest in some way, which I find fascinating because, in a lot of places it's like you said, come and do. Even though we'll say like, come, he'll give you rest. Then once you're in,
not
it's
in
like,
this
all
church.
right. It's like, you're in now. What are you gonna do? And
Right.
how is he gonna use you? Use. It's always like, how is he gonna use you? And I'm interested in kind of subverting that a little bit, and asking the question of like, what does it mean to just be with the divine? What does it mean to just be? What is it? Not always be used by the divine, but just be and rest, and live and eat, and play in the presence of the divine.
Absolutely. And last but not least, to experience joy. And one of the things I like that you talk about joy, we've been seeing a lot of things about, black boy joy, all these
Mhm.
different things, black girl joy, all of this. But the fact that you talk about the difference, there's a difference between joy and happiness. What do you
Yeah.
believe that is?
Yeah, I read this while I was writing the book, that um, joy activates a different part of your nervous system than happiness. A lot of research is saying. So happiness activates the part of your nervous system that's excitable, and it creates this energy, this excited kind of like doing, almost a little bit of an adrenaline thing. And then joy operates the other side of your nervous system, which is more grounded, more triggers things like rest and kind of and focus even. And I mean that changed me when I read that, because my whole life you hear people talk about joy. I've always equated it to happiness. By the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with happiness. It's just
Right.
I've never been a person who I've not felt that very close to me. I was my family will tell you, like, I've always been a very solemn child, very kind of solemn person. But my family, I mean, they're just wild. They're like bursting with just like happiness and joy. And I always felt kind of alienated in that way. Like I just felt like there was something I couldn't access about my family that I wanted to. And really it was in writing this book and trying to figure out what I actually think joy is that I realized, no, I mean I have the capacity for it. I do it, but for me it looks much more like contentment, and it looks like not being afraid, and it looks like being at peace, and it's not always this like energetic like happiness where I'm walking around smiling. It's kind of this inner stability. Um, yeah, which was just really helpful for me to think about it that way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We did, as I said, there are 15 chapters in the book. We didn't get into all of them because we would be here for a couple hours or longer. But it's more or less just to be introduced to this lovely writer, Cole Arthur Riley, to be introduced to her work, to know what she's talking about, and to be able to just get an idea, just a little snippet. We have someone saying, "Oh, June, you're welcome, June. Thank
Yes.
you. And if you haven't read the book yet, go get it. Go get it." Somebody else, a friend of mine, friend or family member, because I don't see the name. Yes, please watch it later. Get all the information, get all of the good stuff, because there is so much that is contained within the book, just the different ideas and concepts that you talk about, bringing in, the spirituality, bringing in, your family stories, bringing in, the arts, the culture, the writings from others as well. It just is it's not, how do I put it? It's not a book, it's not a 500-page book.
Mhm.
But there's just so much contained within it. Is as as I've shown many times, I got a lot of things bookmarked. I'm going to highlight and go back and return to it, because for all of us, our spirituality is a journey, and there are times when we're at a high point. There are times when we're not, and sometimes we just need to be able to tap in to things that other people have said that will resonate with us, and then we can take it and build our own stories or our own journey out from there. So I just think that that's important. And Cole Arthur Riley, you are the bomb.com. I know that's
Thank you.
what old people say. Old people. Oh man, but I really love the work that you're doing. Um, and I know you do a lot of writing as well. So there was an article that you had out talking about Black History Month and being glad
Mhm.
that it's over, because people want to use you and your labor. White spaces want you to come in and talk about Black history instead of going and learning and doing things for themselves. They want to tax you out, all those sorts of things. So Nicole is definitely someone that you want to keep up with. All of her places have been scrolling at the bottom, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, her website. Just continue to follow and see what she's got going on. Cole, is there any last thing you'd like to share with us? Any, that people need to know about either this here flash or the work that you're doing?
No, no, just thank you. Thanks for inviting me into your space, and thanks for the space you're creating with the Brown Girl Collective, which is, I know, a refuge for a lot of people. So I'm just grateful to be a part of it. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love talking to somebody who could be my daughter. I love it. I love it. I love it. So thank you so much. I'm going to let you go, and I'll do a couple of quick announcements for everybody else. But thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
you.
Godspeed. And I will continue to follow and keep up with everything you've got going on.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye bye. All right. So I hope you all have enjoyed the conversation that we had with Cole Arthur Riley this evening. It was indeed a pleasure for me to talk to her. And if anyone has not been following her work, please feel free to do so because you will be blessed by all of the wonderful things that she shares on a daily basis on social media. And then, of course, doing multiple things at the same time. Also to just be able to tap into all of that and be encouraged and uplifted as well. And I mentioned earlier the last couple of guests that I had on, Olivia Cole, who Olivia, who came on and talked about Freedom at the Mat. It was a very good guest. I might have said the wrong last name, so forgive me. But Olivia came on and talked to us about Freedom at the Mat. Then we had Faith on last week. Actually, have her book here. Faith Hunter was here to talk about Spiritually Fly. If you haven't had an opportunity to watch either of those, please do so, because if you watch those and then tap into what Cole and I talked about this evening, it all kind of goes together. But to let you know, next week I am taking a night off just because it's good to do so every now and again, just to have a night of rest. But I am doing so that I can also celebrate the 200th anniversary of the birth of Harriet Tubman, which is next week. So I will be posting some things about that. I'm affiliated with Girl Trek, which is a walking um, group for Black women all around the world. There are over 1 million Black women walking. Harriet Tubman is our patron saint, so to speak, who, she got out and walked to save her own life and then went back to get others walking to help them save their lives. And that's what Girl Trek is all about. So I will be posting about that. I'm taking next week off so that I can, in sisterhood, support the things that Girl Trek is doing, and then be back in a couple of weeks with some more great guests. So as always, I thank everyone for being here. I appreciate you. I love you. And I just want every one of you to continue to do whatever it takes for you to live well, sister. Have a good evening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.